Thanks for joining us today, guys. Today we are joined by Joey Mure, and excited for him to share a little bit about his perspective. He's with Wealth Without Wall Street, and excited for him again to share a bit. So, Joey, you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Oh yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me, and always love to share our story that hopefully it inspires people and gives people a little bit of a process that maybe they could follow if they're after the same things we are. I was telling you kind of pre-show, my background was 11 years in the mortgage business. Learned a lot of things, including the fact that climbing the corporate ladder and a higher income did not equal freedom. At the end of the day, I have 5 daughters, and I remember that, man, I was making more income than I ever thought in my young 20s, but realized I was trading that for time with them. So I remember specifically being at the beach with them and just telling them, hey, you guys go down to the beach. I'll be right behind you. I have to take this one last call. And you know what's going to happen now, right? So 2 hours later, I'm walking down the boardwalk to the beach, and they're walking back up the boardwalk with these just faces like, I can't believe you would give up our vacation for another work phone call. You're supposed to be off work. And those are the things that kind of stick in my mind as anchors that really forced me to say something's got to give. Like this equation or formula doesn't lead to more of what I want. It leads to less of what I want. And that kind of set me on a path. And 2014 broke out of the mortgage industry and started a Wealth Without Wall Street with my business partner, Russ Morgan, and started to just document the process that I took with him. And now, here we are in 2022. We've created multiple businesses and over 50,000 a month in passive income in addition to our active businesses. And it's really a totally change of pace as it relates to family time and the freedom that affords.
So one of the first steps to be able to change, right, is an acknowledgement that something is wrong or different, right? As you were going through that change, right, where you can articulate now looking back that you were trading time for money, what was the biggest resource or thing that helped give you that realization and help pivot you to something different?
So I'd say 2 things. Number one, a book that my business partner now, but previously just friend, Russ, gave me. He actually charged me $20 for the book. Can you believe that? I was like, dude, you want me to read this book? Like, you should just give it to me. But he knew that I was cheap and I probably wouldn't read it. So I paid for it, thus I had to read it. But he gave me this book in 2009, and it totally shifted the way that I think about finances. Like, I started looking at the places I was putting money and realizing that those things were not getting me closer to financial freedom. They were keeping me at arm's length from my money. And it weren't giving me like the ability to control or influence what that money was doing. I was totally at someone else's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I was basically left up to whatever they were going to do with it. And that just wasn't right. I never questioned it before reading that book. And then secondly, there's those situations with your kids that just are profound, but they're super simple. One example was one of my daughters, when I was driving her to Mother's Day out one day, and she's sitting in the back in her car seat, got her little backpack next to her. And she says, Dad, you gonna pick me up from school today? And I said, no, baby. I mean, it was almost kind of like, why would you even ask me that? You know better than that. Like, I never even took her to school because usually I was already in the office and all this kind of stuff. I was like, no, I have to go to work. She said, well, why are you not going to pick me up? I said, your mom's going to pick you up. I have to go to work. And she said, well, why do you have to go to work? I said, well, because I got to pay for this car. I got to pay for our house, the food that we eat. She said, we already have a house. We already have a car. And it was the simple, like I said, the simplest conversation with, I don't know, what she was 3 at the time or whatever. But it was one of those things that, again, was like an anchor that said, I just told my daughter I have to go to work. And it just didn't seem right. It just seemed like, why wouldn't I? At this stage of life, she is so into dad. She loves time with dad. And that's not always going to be here. Like, why am I not actively trying to take some of this income I've been blessed with and turn it into passive income? Like, active income has to be turned into passive income, or I'm always going to give her the same answer. And that just wasn't good for me.
What was the book, Joey?
Oh, Become Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. And, we were talking offline about being a banker, right? Like seeing the world from the financial standpoint, and there's borrowers and there's lenders and there's a bank in between, somebody that's making the money in between. And so I understood that concept from being in the mortgage business. I understood it. And I realized I was not taking advantage of becoming the banker in my own life, and started implementing some things from that book. And over 4 years, realized, man, this is a game changer. Like my whole like future kind of opened up, and I started seeing things way differently. And even though I didn't have all the passive income figured out yet, I started realizing there's a lot more opportunity out here than what I was giving credit to.
So as we play with that concept of taking active income and turning it into passive, right? You started to make this shift in 2014. It sounds like you joined Russ, kind of started your own thing, started to have active income that was coming in again. What was that process for you in the beginning of shifting from active to passive, and what did it look like? What was your strategic framework for, you put as much as you could and eat on rice and beans, or, how did you manage that shift?
Well, so the whole story is from 2014 to about 2017, it was a rice and beans kind of conversation, because here, and I don't know if I shared this with you, but before I left the mortgage business, my wife was at home with our I think we had 3 daughters at the time. Our 4th was on the way. And which, by the way, was nuts to go to your wife who's pregnant and she stays home and say, hey, we make over $300,000 a year. I think God's calling me to just start this business and start from scratch with $0. And she was like, you should do it. And I thought, oh my goodness, my wife is like believing in me. Like, she wants this to happen. This is amazing. That gave me a lot of confidence, by the way. But our lifestyle was a $300,000+ lifestyle. And here I was starting from scratch. If I had not been implementing the things from that book 4 years prior, we wouldn't have made it. I'm just going to tell you, like, I had access to capital that I could use throughout that time that gave me a lot of confidence to continue to build a business. So that's a takeaway. Just for people that are building a business or even in the early stages, man, access to cash gives confidence, gives you runway. It was a major opportunity for us. And so then I was really more focused on just active income for those several years, like trying to get back to some normalcy of what I was used to seeing. And once that started to occur, we shifted and we started to say, okay, we've got to have some passive income, right? Where do we start? I have no idea. And that's when our podcast launched, right? So in 2017, we started our podcast and we started interviewing people that have an expertise in some passive income source, whether it's land flipping, short-term rentals, private lending, whether it's ATM syndications, people having RV parks, mobile home parks, like you name it, all the different strategies that are out there. And we were just taking notes for years. And then like I mentioned, during that time, those conversations with family started to happen. And I was like, wait a minute, we need to start eating our own dog food, right? We need to start doing what we say that people should do. And so we started leading with that in 2020, which great time, right? We started implementing as many of these as we could. And we started reporting it to the world on our podcast. So we have a report every month that comes out that we tell you exactly what we made in all these different passive income streams so that you can see, like, do these things work? Do they not? Like, we have nothing to sell you on those things. Like, they're just our personal report. And slowly over time, we went from our first one was something like $2,500 between Russ and I combined to over 50,000 a month in all these different areas. And yeah, we can get more granular. And you asked me more like, how did we start transitioning? So I probably missed that, but that's kind of the end result.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had access to people and connections who were investing in a lot of different passive income streams. Sounds like a lot of them real estate based, a couple other, syndications, other business models with the ATMs, et cetera, that just gave you visibility. When you decided to jump in, how did you know which one to start with? Right now you've taken
Great
notes
question.
on 20 to 30, right? Like, okay, I've got some some active income that I've put aside, right? It's a small chunk, it's not mass. Like, where do I start?
Yeah, great question. And I would say we didn't do it right the first time. And it helped us to learn the long way. Most people don't understand that the investments that we choose can either increase our path to financial freedom or it can slow it down. And I'll give you an example. So my business partner, Russ, bought a single family condo just for a rental, right? He got the deal of the century. Oh man, listen, I got this deal. This was back in 2007. So imagine that time. Hey, we just converted these apartments to condos. This is the last one. I'll tell you what, they're selling for like 120. I'll give it to you for 70. And it's already got a renter. Oh, I mean, it sounds like a great deal, right? He's like, sit on it for a year or two. You could cash out and you're good. You make all this appreciation. He's like, sounds good. He starts doing it. He's making his little $100 a month rent or whatever net income rent. And he's just bored to tears. He's like, this sucks, man. I no, there's no cash, hardly at all. And I can't influence it. Like Russ is an influencer guy. Like he loves to be involved and he doesn't want to do the details, but he wants to like be in some sort of an advisory role or like have some input. You can't do that with a turnkey kind of rental property. So what he did is he ended up sitting on like investing for like, 8 years, just never really invested in anything else because he just didn't have exposure. And he just kind of was like, I don't want to do more of that. That sucks. Well, what we did is we realized that there's an investor DNA, right? You are uniquely gifted to see the world in a certain way. Like God has given you certain perspectives, experiences, and strengths and weaknesses that aid you in really seeing investments a certain way. And so what we did is we partnered with the people at DISC and created a profile called the Investor DNA. And when people take it, it comes with, first of all, a lot of information about your personality. Everybody loves to learn about that. But secondly, it comes with a matrix of 6 passive income strategies. And what would you like about those if you're a high D or a low I or S or C, right? And what would you not like so much? And what kind of resources are available or necessary to take advantage of this strategy at the highest value? And so how much time is necessary to get them started? Of course, we want them to be passive long-term, but some of them have to start as a side hustle and then grow into a passive income stream. And so that's a long way to answer your question, but we made some mistakes along the way to figure out, wait a minute, why is it that we have success with these sort of business models and we don't really like gravitate toward a lot of syndications and hands-off models because we want to have some sort of impact. We have a platform that we can share with the world. Let's do more of those things. And anyway, long story, but you need to know your investor DNA. It is a super valuable way to know, to give you confidence and to see success quickly.
So it sounds like that helped you guys, and particularly the story you were telling about Russ. I'm guessing things that are important to you are hands-on, full ownership, ability to make decisions, control of whatever the deal is that leads you into full ownership of things versus, syndication, as you had mentioned. Is that an accurate assumption?
Not exactly, because we're okay not to be like the primary owner of a business or have controlling rights or whatever. We want the best operator that can make sure, because neither one of us are good at the details. Neither one of us are good at follow through. I'm just grateful I showed up today, for this podcast. Like someone, my assistant was like, get on this podcast. But the reality is like we know our strengths and our weaknesses. One of those is we got to have really strong team behind it, whatever we do. In some cases, that may be a minority stake. We might take a super minority stake in a business. We're looking at some e-commerce businesses right now that we want to purchase, but we know that there's certain buy box that if it involves us having to do any sort of operations, we're out. Like it's not even an option. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but there's some syndications where we want to be involved at a GP level, but we could be a minority in that because we just want to have some sort of like influence and impact on those deals versus just putting our money in and, allowing it to work for us without any sort of, influence.
So you mentioned Russ essentially investing in a condo, long-term rental. What was your path? What did you pick first? And would you do the same thing now, or would you go back and do something different with the kind of same amount of money and knowledge you had at the time?
So great question. The first thing I would say is I bought a condo as well, but it was actually the one my wife and I were living in when we first got married, and we outgrew it super fast. As soon as we had our first kid, we're like, we just started getting all the things from the baby shower, and we're like, these have no place to go in our house. Like, this is absurd. So we moved out into a house, and we were like, okay, I guess we just rent this. And it was a terrible rental. Like, I maybe was break even for 15 years. Like, I am so bad at long-term rentals because I didn't buy it with that intention. And I would have said for years and years, this is the worst thing I ever did. And then when we started our short-term rental business in 2020, it was the first unit that we actually took on for our model. Like, it was our trial run. And it was so good in 30 days after we started it, it launched us to 27 units over the next 2 years. So I'm forever grateful that I did it now. But if you asked me 3 years ago, I'd be like, this is a dog. Like, I wish I would have never done it. But now, it went from making $50 to $100 a month max to now it's averaging probably $1,600 a month net cash flow with the short-term rental model attached to it. So that was one of the first things. The second thing I did, which was terrible, I bought into a diamond mined penny stock. A buddy of mine, this was back, I knew nothing. Hey man, I don't want you to miss out on this. Like, I would feel bad if if this thing hit and I didn't tell you. Of course, I put money in that. It's worthless. Like, there's nothing to show for it. My Roth IRA, I put more money in it than it was ever worth. So I dumped that years ago when I started learning these things. And then the last thing I did before I really started getting into more passive is I did some private lending. After I left the mortgage business, I started doing some private mortgages on people that could not get conventional financing, but they were good collateral, good risks from my perspective. I was used to underwriting people and, the whole situation. And those were really good. The thing I didn't like about it was I tied up my capital for 15 years. And the great news is they paid me off within 2, but I was really sweating like, why did I do that? Like I should have made this a much shorter term loan so that I could keep turning it over and finding more opportunities. So there's way more things that came behind that, but those are the first things. And I wouldn't have done the private mortgages again. I would have done the condo now looking back on it, but maybe would have just saved all that time and started it in 2020 instead of 2004. And never would I do a penny stock, assumption of what the value will be in the future. That's just not my game.
Would you do the private lending with a shorter term?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah,
it was
I
the
think that's a
term
great
component of
game.
the private lending piece that was the, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was my learning. That was my learning moment.
So we talked about short-term rentals, which has been very popular over the last couple of years, particularly as people are looking to expand portfolios. How did you manage getting into short-term rentals with the fact that you don't want to be an operator and it's not a strong suit, right? When you identified like, hey, let's go try this. What did that look like for you?
Great question. We had a friend who had a renovation company for about 10 years. And it had just during the turn of the pandemic gotten shut down. Like banks started seizing, his lines of credit, and it went south very quickly. And he was looking for a new opportunity. And we were just at that time, like, we got to figure out how to do this, but we got to do it hands off. And so we kind of took a risk, but we knew his personality, we knew his background, and we knew, like, from a standpoint of what we were looking for in an operator, he would have been perfect. So what we did is we invested in him a small salary. We invested in him a training program with a coach. And we basically said, in order for this to work, we got to scale to 18 units in 12 months. Are you up for that? And he's like, absolutely. Like, let's figure this thing out. And it was before we even had the first unit. So we hired him. We did my unit, my condo, and we saw how that went. And we were like, game on, like, this is going to be good. He went out, he negotiated all the, we actually do an arbitrage model where we lease the property and then we make the net between the lease and what we earn on the short-term rental side. So we don't own any of the other properties besides mine. And so he would go out and find the places to speak to the landlords, negotiate the leases, set up all the systems, buy the furniture, do all the design work, and get them started on Airbnb and VRBO and things like that. And like I said, within 12 months, we actually went to 21 units. And then in the last 12 to 18 months, we've added on now where we even manage other people's units, and we've got up to 27 total.
Much lower capital too, in terms of what you need to be able to expand on that end when you're leasing versus purchasing.
Well, and even if you'll remember back, I mean, in 2020, I was thinking we're at the top end of the market. Why would we buy a bunch of properties right now? Let's leverage our cash the fastest we can by doing this arbitrage model and just rent them. And then whenever the market crashes, we can go and start purchasing properties. Well, that's what's on the horizon in the next 24 months, is to start looking for those creative deals we could get into, that we could take advantage of a down slope here.
So if the listeners are thinking like, hey, what's hot today? If you were to say, hey, if you're just starting and you've got the opportunity and you're trying to generate passive income in today's volatile market, where would you recommend the one place that people should look? Obviously, different personas, to your point about the things. But assuming we'll take a peanut butter approach, right, and try to distill it down to one area or one vertical, what would that be for you?
So I would say two things. Number one, if you are in the super passive, like, I don't have any time, I have money, then I would say finding an operator that knows how to lend in a down market I know you and I were talking offline. Some of the strategies you were sharing with me that your company does, I was like, that's a great business plan. Like, I think investors could get behind what you're doing, because if they just need a safe place that's collateralized, that is going to come back to them on a regular basis, that to me is a great place to start. But if you're thinking, I want to be a little bit more active, or I want to learn how to actually start a business myself, or maybe with your kids, my 16-year-old is doing this right now. That's why I'm telling you about it. But we started a land flipping business 2 years ago, and this is where we literally go out and we find land at super discounted rates. Like, you'd be shocked at how people would do this, but they get behind on their taxes on land. They're out of state owners. They may have inherited it. There's all these factors, but ultimately people will sell you their land for 25 cents on the dollar. Sometimes totally unforeseen, because they just want out. Like, think about it. Like, if you had 3 weed eaters in your garage and somebody walked up and was like, hey man, how much do you want for the weed eater? And you're like, I was hoping somebody was going to come and offer me this, because it's just taking up space, right? I'll give you for $10. Okay, sold. Well, it may have been worth $100, but you just want it out of your hair. Same with land. And so we buy the land 25 cents on the dollar. We turn around, we sell it on the retail market for full price, but on terms. So very similar to becoming the bank, like we talked about earlier. And so we just make it a car payment, right? So, hey, you bought this land for, I can sell you this land for $10,000 or $250 a month for X amount of months. We can work with you on the terms, what works well for you. And all of a sudden, the person that wants to buy land has a much lower barrier of entry. And we've made it now a recurring revenue stream to create passive income. Now, it sounds like a lot of work, and it is. So you either have to be willing to learn the skill and then eventually replace yourself as a side hustle turned to a business. Or what we did is we hired a team that was already doing it and just put the capital behind it. And so now that business, we're actually going to report for this past month, is topping $24,000 in recurring note income. And it's just been built in the last, like I said, two to 2.5 years.
That's awesome. If someone wanted to get involved, like where do they start? Like, you say, great, I want to do this land flipping. How the heck do I find someone that does land flipping? Where do they go?
Yeah. So I recommend the guys that we work with is thelandgeek.com. If you go there, Mark Podolsky is a personal friend, and he's actually on the board of our passive income mastermind. So he's somebody that we trust. He runs our business and has a phenomenal team. They have coaches that will teach you this from scratch. But I would say that even one step back from that is, even if it sounds good, start with your investor DNA. Like, start with, because I feel like there's a major problem in the investing world is that we get rate of return like crazy. Like, oh, I just want rate of return. I just want rate of return. What's the highest rate of return? And it doesn't matter. Like, none of those things matter if the investment itself doesn't match up with who you are. And if you haven't started with the end in mind, like, what is my ultimate objection or objective? Do I want financial freedom? Like, I need more passive income than I have monthly expenses. Like, just do the math for yourself right now, as though like you're listening to our conversation. What are my monthly expenses? I calculate that up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but what's that number? And how much passive income do I have right now? If I have a rental property that's creating $300 a month, and I've got, $3,000 a month in expenses, I'm just making stuff up, I'm 10% of the way to my goal. Now, how much simpler does that get in your brain than thinking, oh, I need to put $3 million away into a 401k and hope that it's enough that I can live on for the rest of my life? Like, there's so many variables in that formula, you cannot win, right? Wall Street has duped us into thinking that we should put money away in all these things and hope for the best. And it's not a strategy. But if I can do the math and I can say I have $10,000 of expenses, where am I at right now in terms of that goal? And how can I focus on increasing that passive income through the things that I am a great investor for? It's amazing the opportunities you'll find and how quickly you can get there. I mean, we're not talking about millions and millions of dollars it takes to get into any of these strategies. Some of them, like the land flipping thing, there are people that start in that strategy with like a couple $1,000, because you can go buy property for $200, $500 from the first buyer or seller and turn around and sell it for 3 and 4 times that. And you just do it over and over and over again. So long story short, that's what I would recommend. And that's the path that we walk people through every day.
What's the, where can people find this Investor DNA disc analysis, 1, and 2, what's the best way for people to connect back with you, Joey?
So we've talked about a bunch of different things today. If it's okay, I think the best thing would be I put several things on a page. If you go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/prosperity perspective, go there and you should find access to, we have a free survey. We have, if you want more information on our mastermind, it'll be there. Or if you just want to jump on a call with one of our coaches for 15 minutes, they will help identify like what it is that you're looking for and what your right next thing is in that process. And if that includes, hey, I just want to know where the Investor DNA is, you can join our community for free. And I think that course is like $100. It's nothing substantial, but I'm happy to help you get in the right direction.
That'd be awesome, Joey. Appreciate you providing that value for the audience, and encourage all of you to go check it out. Joey's got some amazing insights, and really appreciate having you on the show today, Joey.
Oh, Liam, it's been great. I love the banter of our conversation, and hopefully it's valuable, helping people turn active income into passive income. That's the way to freedom.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you again.